Good afternoon. My name is J.R.R. Tolkien, and I'm being interviewed today because someone decided to or wants to ask me questions about my fantastic books, The Lord of the Rings.
How did the orcs first come into being?
Well, the orcs were originally created by Morgoth, Melkor. However, Melkor did not have the power to independently create life. He instead captured elves and tortured them and beat them until they were mindless fools and became the orcs.
If all of the other races were created by the Valar, how were the hobbits created?
Well, the origin of the hobbits is unknown, but it is said that they are loosely related to mankind.
Were there any allegories or metaphors in Lord of the Rings?
Well, I cordially dislike allegory and in all its manifestations, and always have done so, since I grew old and wary, enough to detect its presence. I prefer history, true or feigned, with its varied applicability to the thought and experience of the readers. I think that many confuse applicability with allegory, but the one resides in the freedom of the reader, and the other in the purposed domination of the author.
What are the origins of all of the races in Lord of the Rings?
Well, the elves were created, the elves and men were created by all the Ainur through music. The dwarves were created in secret by one of the Valar who wanted someone to teach his crafts to. And when Iluvatar found out that he had created them, he offered to destroy the dwarves, but because they had not been created out of malice, Iluvatar allowed them to remain.
What exactly is Tom Bombadil?
Well, Tom's origin and the extent of his powers are for the most part unknown. All that is really known of him is that he is extremely old. Possibly older than the Valar themselves.
Why is the mortality of men referred to as the gift of men in Lord of the Rings?
Now that is a great question. Iluvatar, the god, willed that the spirits of and hearts of men are not content with Arda, and find no rest in it, and therefore seek beyond the world and its confines. They are not bound to the circles of the world, as the elves and all the creatures of Arda are bound to earth. The spirits of men leave the physical world and do not return. The gift liberates them from the physical world.
Who are the Balrogs?
The Balrogs were servants of Melkor's and his fiercest warriors. Originally, they were Maiar, like Gandalf and Saruman, until they were corrupted and for his service for becoming of the elves.
Why does Gandalf use his powers so rarely in Lord of the Rings?
Well, Gandalf is, as we all know, a Maiar, and was sent to Middle-earth to advise and assist men in the war against Sauron. He is not there as a warrior, and is not meant to use his full powers against lesser beings like orcs. He only really uses it against other Maiars like the Balrog or Saruman.
Why is Aragorn able to live so much longer than all the other men in Lord of the Rings?
Well, Aragorn is, he lived to be to the age of 210. And the reason being is because he is a direct descendant of Isildur, making him one of the Dunedain. They were rewarded by the Valar with longer life, greater wisdom, and greater height for their service in the War of Wrath.
What is Valinor, and why did Gandalf and the elves sail there in the end of the book?
Valinor is the home of the Valar and the Maiar, like Gandalf. The elves were invited to join the Valar in Valinor during the First Age. During the Second Age, the men became jealous and rebelled. They tried to sail to Valinor with an army, and as they did so, Uru Ilúvatar removed Valinor from the world, so it was inaccessible by men forever after. However, it was also permitted for elves. It was still permitted for elves to sail on a straight sea and reach Valinor. Although they could not then return to Middle-earth, for elves, it is a final resting place. And for Gandalf, it is his home, and he must return to it after his work on Middle-earth was complete.
Why did Frodo go with Gandalf and the elves to Valinor in the end of the book?
Well, Frodo went with Gandalf and the elves because he had been damaged both mentally and physically by being stabbed by a ringwraith and also by the burden of the ring. He would never fully heal from these injuries, so he was allowed to come with the elves to the Undying Lands so he could find rest.
How and why did Gandalf come back as Gandalf the White?
Well, Gandalf was killed in his fight with Balrog, Durin's Bane. Because he is a Maiar, when his physical body was destroyed, his spirit went back to Valinor, where he was sent back to Middle-earth because his work was not finished. He took Saruman's place as the White Wizard because Saruman had betrayed his purpose and was cut off from the power of Valinor.
What happened to Sauron when the ring was destroyed?
Well, Sauron invested so much of his powers into the ring that when it was destroyed, he was so horribly maimed and reduced that he would never be a threat again. He became a spirit of malice, unable to ever grow or take it form again.
There were 9 rings for men, 7 for dwarves, and 3 for elves that Sauron intended to control with 1 ring. Why were the men completely corrupted and turned into ring wraiths, and the elves and dwarves seemingly unaffected?
Well, the rings were not able to bind dwarves to the will of Sauron because the dwarves are sturdy folks and are not affected by magic very much. All the rings, basically what the rings really did to the dwarves was increase their lust for gold. The elves became aware of Sauron's deception and removed the rings while Sauron was in possession of the 1 ring. The elves only began to use their rings freely once Sauron lost possession of that 1 ring. The men, on the other hand, in their lust and greed for power, accepted the rings and were easily corrupted by them.